10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 241. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 241 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. As always, we are really happy to have you here, whether you are a returning listener or a brand new listener. Hope everybody is doing really well out there, and we are going to continue our series on the minor blues this week. So before we jump into that, if you're new to the show, I wanted to let you know that we are a listener-supported podcast, and the way that we get support from people like you is through our Patreon page. And if you'd like to find that, you can go to 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners. It will bring you over to Patreon and tell you all of the benefits you will get from a very small donation each and every month. I've got a lot of people to thank this week, both new patrons and people that have been patrons for a while that are editing their pledges up to the $5 level. So let's start with the new patrons. Thank you to our new $3 patron, Jim, and thank you to our new $5 patrons, Michael, Tommy, and Helene. I also want to thank John, Andy, Donald, and Patrick for editing their pledges from $3 up to that $5 level to get those extra benefits. And there are tremendous benefits, including a PDF worksheet for every single episode and audio examples to make your life easier when it comes to practicing the stuff that we're giving you each and every week. So if you'd like to learn more, get signed up and get instant access to all the PDFs from every single episode that we've ever done. Again, go to 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, get yourself signed up today. All right, let's jump into today's episode. Okay, so quick review of what we're doing this month and what we've done so far. So we are reharmonizing the minor blues progression this month, and we're doing that to make it a little bit more interesting, to add some spice to your solos, to add some unexpected sounds that listeners will be impressed by, and it'll make them want to keep listening to your solos. So what we've done is we have reharmonized a couple of different spots. The first spot that we did was measure 2. And what we did there was we did a 2-5 back to the 1 chord. So instead of hanging out on the 1 chord for 4 measures, we inserted a 2-5 in there to give us a little bit of harmonic motion in that first 4 measures. Now, the second thing that we did was we added the flat 6 to 5 turnaround again in the last measure, where traditionally we might just do a 5 chord. We added that flat 6 to 5 again just to make it a little bit more interesting and give you a little bit of momentum going into your next chorus of solo. Now, if you have any questions about those two, or if you have any questions about the baseline minor blues progression, go back to episode 239 and 240 and check those out because we explain them in detail in those 2 episodes. So today we're going to go over another spot, and we're going to go over 2 variations of that spot that I think are going to be really interesting for you. So the spot is going to be measure 8. Now, we know in a traditional blues, we play that 6 chord going into the 2 chord in measure 8, and that's like my favorite part of the blues. I think that's the most interesting part of the blues. So it makes sense that we would do something in the minor blues in measure 8 to get us into the turnaround that happens in the minor blues, that flat 6-5 that happens in measures 9 and 10. Now, we have to do something a little bit different in the minor blues because after all, we're not going to the 2 chord, we're going to that flat 6 chord in measure 9. So let's talk about a couple of things we can do. The first one, you may have guessed already. If you've been listening to this show for a long time, when we talk about harmony and talk about working our way backward in regards to harmony, you may have already figured out what I'm going to do in this first example, and it is just a plain old 2-5. But what we're going to do is we're going to play a 2-5 to the flat 6, moving to the flat 6. So you would call that a 2 of flat 6, and a 5 of flat 6 moving into that flat 6 chord. And this can give us a little bit of momentum going into measure 9, whereas before we would have just been playing the 1 chord, and then all of a sudden that flat 6 chord would have hit. So let's check out what that sounds like in terms of the progression. So I want you to keep your ears on measure 8 and figure out if this is a sound that you like or not. Then we're going to talk about another variant. So here's the first variant, 2 of flat 6 to 5 of flat 6, finally landing on that flat 6 in measure 9. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can hear that B flat minor 7 chord concert pitch comes out of nowhere. You really don't expect that. And the ear goes, wait, what the heck is going on here? And then all of a sudden, when it lands on that flat 6 chord in measure 9, it makes total sense. So I really like that one. That's a great progression. As I said, it's kind of a little bit unexpected, which is a really good thing. All right, so what's our second variation? Well, here, what we've done is we've thought outside the box a little bit. Now, I want to talk about the main turnaround, so measure 9 and 10. What's happening there? We're moving in half steps, right? We're going from the flat 6 down to the 5, and then we're resolving that to 1. So what if we use that same idea to get into the flat 6 chord? So if we're thinking in concert pitch, our flat 6 chord is A flat 7. So what if we were to come into that by half steps? So this time in measure 8, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a B flat 7 chord. That's going to come down to an A7 chord. And then finally, we're going to land on the A flat 7 chord. So I'm using the fact that the turnaround involves a half step progression, and I'm keeping that same sound, that same idea, by putting it in measure 8 as well. So the problem with doing a Roman numeral analysis of this is that it's almost more complicated than it's worth, meaning that to do the Roman numerals, it's going to be actually more confusing than just thinking about what it is. So basically, we just start a whole step above the flat 6, and we move into it by going down a half step, and then obviously down another half step. So usually I do this Roman numeral analysis with you, but in this case, I'm going to go ahead and say that it's actually more confusing than it's worth. Just think about starting a whole step above in measure 8 and then moving down until you reach that flat 6 chord. And I know if there are any music theorists out there listening to this, that's going to be really annoying to you because you want to do a formal analysis. Sometimes that's just not the best idea. Sometimes that's just more confusing than it's worth. Okay, so let's check out what this progression sounds like. Again, pay attention to measure 8 and listen to how those chords move down by half step, finally landing on the flat 6. All right, let's try this one. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can hear that gives a completely different sound than the last one. I mean, we do start on a similar chord, but this time the chord is dominant instead of minor. So it gives a very, very different effect. And then I love the sound of that A7 chord. And it provides some gravity when we go into the A flat 7 chord. And that's what we are all about here. So now you've got a lot going on in this minor blues progression. And there's a lot more you can do. So one thing I want you to do is obviously I want you to practice both of these sounds over the progression and see if you can start to incorporate them using very, very simple devices, but just using those chords to your advantage. And then the second thing I would like you to do is I would like you to start thinking about some other places in the minor blues where you might be able to start adding a few reharmonizations. This is really going to be the key for you is to start thinking outside of what I'm showing you and start thinking about your own places, your own creative ways of reharming this. And I'll give you a hint. There's a really, really obvious place to do another reharmonization in that second line. So in the middle four measures of the progression. See if you can find something that you can do in the middle of that middle four bars of the progression. I'm purposefully being very cryptic because I want you to think about it, but there is a place in there that makes total sense that is a device that we've kind of already used. So I want you to check that out. And if you can find it, put it in there, see if it works, and try to incorporate that into your playing. Now, if you can't find it or you're racking your brain and you don't know what the heck I'm talking about, that's okay too. Don't get discouraged by that. But if you can start thinking outside of the box, I encourage you to. All right, that's going to about do it for this episode. What I'm going to do at the end here is I'm going to take about 4 choruses over the minor blues, and I'm going to incorporate some of these reharmonizations into it, some of these brand new ones that we went over in this episode, and really listen to which one I'm using because I've shown you 2 different options. So I want you to really put your ears on measure 8 and try to figure out whether I'm using that 2/5 or whether I'm using that chromatic motion to get into the flat 6 chord in the turnaround. Okay. Again, if you want to get the PDFs with the reharmonizations on them, if you want to get this little improvisation that I'm playing pulled out of the episode and made separate, you can do that on Patreon. Again, go to 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, get yourself signed up today, and we really appreciate your support. Okay, hope everybody's doing well and staying healthy out there, and we'll see you next week with a brand new episode. Bye, everybody.